Keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
Welcome into the GSMC Football Podcast right here on the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Brice Lewis. Yes, sir. The deadline for franchise tag players and long-term extensions has came to a close. So obviously, you know, today's show, we're going to get all over that, discuss all the deals that were made, all the deals that weren't made, and also discuss other news around the league. Obviously, we still have some more updates on maybe what the NFLPA is thinking in terms of the league returning, some of the things they may want in place for the players, just in case because of COVID-19, leaving a lot of things in uncertainty. And just, you know, like I said, all types of different football news that we're going to discuss here on the podcast today. So thank you for tuning in and listening again for another episode here at the GSMC Podcast Network. So, like I said, we're going to get right into it. We're going to start with some deals. We're actually going to start with a deal that didn't get done, but apparently almost got done. Mr. Dak Prescott. We all know about Dallas and Dak's situation in Dallas and everything that, you know, has happened between them. And, you know, basically, feels like they've been doing negotiations for like a year and a half. They weren't able to come to anything by today's deadline. So apparently Dallas had actually offered a contract in the range of $33 to $35 million with over $100 million guaranteed. And apparently him and Dak, they were close, but they just couldn't do it in time. And so Dak will play the season on the $31 million franchise tag. Obviously, not everybody in the Dak Prescott family was happy about this. His brother actually came out and tweeted saying, you know, there's a reason why I was never a Dallas Cowboys fan. And I see why, and it won't be that much longer while I'm rooting for him just because Dak is still playing on the team. So obviously maybe that could be an insight into what Dak may be feeling, as well as obviously you would think someone who's close to Dak like that as a brother, as sibling, would maybe have some idea about how his Dak is feeling about the situation. Now, one thing that we have to point out here with this entire situation is, you know, even though this deal didn't get done today, there are two sides to this argument here with Dak's contract. There's a lot of people who feel like, you know what, Dak is asking for more money than what he's worth. He hasn't proved anything to ask for the type of money he wants. The money that they would have gave him would have made him, before Patrick Mahomes' deal, the highest paid quarterback in the league, but for some reason he's trying to reach for more, and he's not worth more. And then you have the other side that feels like Jerry Jones had plenty of time to get this deal done. He could have easily locked up Dak, but he was refusal. He tried to hold back. And on top of that, he's paying other players, but not paying Dak. So obviously, you got to see how Dak looks, how Dak maybe looks at that and feels seeing that. So obviously, there's a lot of questions there between the franchises and the quarterback. Will this maybe even affect the relationship that Dak and Jerry have when it comes to negotiations? Are we headed towards another year after next year's season where Dak's going to get franchise tagged again? I mean, these are all questions that I think people are going to wonder about and see, because, you know, we'll have to see what really happens to me. You know, Dak is a guy who some people like more than others. Dak is I don't want to say controversial, but he's a very polarizing quarterback in my opinion. Some people think he has the potential to be a top quarterback in this game. Some people think he'll be a above average quarterback at best. I mean, he can win you some games, win you some divisions, but he may not be able to get you to the promised land. It's really just a big debate. And so you can even make an argument, that there may be still some more games that we have to see on Dak. I mean, some people may even make that argument. I think Dak is in a position where, you know, he's making the smart move because he's getting his guaranteed money. And obviously if he gets next year, the cap will bump up, especially with Patrick Mahomes' deal, it will bump up. So he'll be getting paid more money than probably what Dallas offered him in this contract next year. But obviously, as every NFL player wants, they want long-term commitment and guaranteed money. They don't want short-term guaranteed money. Because to them, how do you want me to play for you, but you're not even sure if you want me here next year? You know, I think that lingering over someone's head as a player isn't the most ideal situation, and that's why you see players not really be fond of playing in a situation like that, because why would they want to be in a situation where they're not even sure if the team necessarily wants them to be there to that extent? You know what I'm saying? It's one of those types of situations. And so, you know, this is a situation that Dallas, I'm sure, would prefer not have lingering over the franchise's head with the quarterback situation going into next year, but we'll have to see what happens with Mike McCarthy and Dak. Obviously, if anything, this is a year for Dak to really say, okay, if I go out here and I ball and I lead us to the playoffs, we win like 10, 11 games, maybe make it to the NFC Championship game, you got to pay me. Like, I came out here, I produced, and I won. So where's the money? And Jerry's going to be put in a tight spot that he has to answer those questions. He has to sit there and give Dak the answers that he's looking for. And if not, Dak might even get to a point where if they even think about franchising him again, he might be willing to sit out games. He might even ask for a trade. These are all potential possibilities. So we'll have to kind of keep an eye out potentially on the Dallas Cowboys QB situation, because with the way things are going right now and them not being able to reach a deal, we'll have to see what happens whenever they can start up negotiations again. Because obviously I would think if you're smart, unless Dak has a terrible season and gets hurt, it gives you that ability to sit here and say, okay, we could use the contract we left off on as a starting point. If he has a good year or a typical good Dak Prescott year, you can maybe sit here and start with the same contract you had last year, and then look at that and then build off of that, and then potentially then move on up and get to where you may want to be for both sides, where they both can mutually agree on a price and on and years and contract language, and then be able to work everything out at the end of the day. Other news with deals done. Miles Garrett signs a mega deal, $125 million deal over 5 years with over $100 million guaranteed. Obviously, Miles Garrett, we all know about what happened with Mason Rudolph this past year. Obviously, the helmet hitting incident, throwing incident. Obviously, not a good blemish on his record, but the Browns still look at Miles Garrett as a cornerstone piece. He was the number one overall draft pick for them a few years ago, and he is probably one of the best young defensive ends in the game today. And they're paying him like monster money for this. So they're obviously expecting him to be their J.J. Watt, their Khalil Mack, their dominating, disruptive defender. And, you know, hey, some people feel like he got overpaid. Some people feel like he shouldn't have gotten paid. Obviously, some people are still bitter about the Mason Rudolph situation. It really just depends on what side you stand on. There's not a solidified side, you could say, to the situation. It's just a matter of, you know, if you look at the player and you look at the production, do you feel like he can live up to it? Because listen, this could be a potential contract. They think Miles Garrett will become a top 3 defensive end in the league. Because like I said, sometimes you give players contracts based off the potential that you see with them. You may view them and say, okay, they seem like they're going to be this top player in the future, so maybe we should pay him as such. So that way it's almost like you could say the contract we gave him was a good bargain. He may play it out more because he got a lot of money, more than he maybe should have gotten at first. And then when that re-up is done, it's like, okay, well, we've gotten the protection. Now it feels like you're, even though you don't really want to do this, you're kind of paying him now for what he has done, and then a little bit of still what you think he still can do as well. So, I mean, obviously, listen, you can't hate on a man like Miles Garrett getting paid. You know, he got his money, and, you know, he's worked hard for his money. And we'll have to see. Obviously, if you're him, you don't want to get into any more Mason Rudolph type situations. You don't want to get into any more of that type of trouble. Because, listen, them paying you this type of money means they're making you a very important face of the franchise. And you don't want to mess that up. You don't want to sabotage that potentially because of, just some bad decisions that sometimes you make from time to time. You definitely want to make sure that you're always trying to make the best decisions you can for the team because the team is what should come first. And Miles Garrett, I'm sure, like I said, he seems like a smart guy. I'm sure he's heard everything. People have told him many things. I'm sure the team has talked to him before. GM Andrew Berry has spoke to him saying, listen, we're giving you this money. So now you need to do your part. Now you need to hold up your end. Don't get in trouble again. Don't mess up again because we need you around. So we have to just see like how it all turns out and how it all goes, because that's what we're going to be looking at going into the future, about the future of the teams coming together and Miles Garrett getting paid, like I said, top defensive end money. So, lastly, in terms of deals, Derrick Henry. 24 hours before the trade deadline, people thought he was playing on the franchise tag. They were even reporting he will probably play on the franchise tag. But I guess a miracle happened, and he's now staying in Tennessee for a long time. I believe a 4-year deal worth $50 million. Doesn't make him the highest paid money, like in terms of like Ezekiel Elliott, but that does put him in the top 5. Obviously, he has $25.5 million guaranteed, and he has a top 5 salary. Obviously, Derrick Henry, we remember what he did last year. We remember how he single-handedly, you could even say, brought Tennessee to the AFC Championship game. He put them on their back and rode them there. I think everybody thinks Tennessee definitely got a great deal done with him today, locking up him in Tannehill long-term. So, obviously, that will probably be your backfield for the years to come in Tennessee. Ryan Tannehill and Derrick Henry, and we'll have to see if maybe potentially they can give him that same magic they were able to get this past year, being able to get to the playoffs and then being able to make a run. A lot of people may not feel like that's possible or think that's going to happen again, but you don't want to sleep on the possibility, and you never want to sit here and just assume something is not going to work. I definitely think that this could work, and we're going to have to see again how it kind of all turns out, how it all kind of goes, because listen, both of these guys, like I said, have done a lot for their respective franchises, and now in Tennessee, with Mike Vrabel, who I feel like is a very underrated but top coach in this game, and the way he is and the way he's coached up this team, giving them the opportunity to say, okay, you're 2 franchise cornerstones on offense. Let's see how far you can take us. So, obviously, that's another good deal for Derrick Henry. And then last deal we're going to get into is Chris Jones also gets paid by the Kansas City Chiefs. He is getting paid, he gets his money that he wanted. We thought they were done because of the fact that they gave Patrick Mahomes the big deal, but it seems like they had some money left over for Chris Jones to get his money right. And hey, you can't hate on it. You can't get bad at it. All you can do is appreciate it. So great job for Chris Jones getting paid, getting himself the money that he said he deserves. Listen, 4 years, $85 million with $60 guaranteed. That's a pretty big deal for the star defensive end. Defensive tackle, my bad, in Kansas City. So we're going to have to see how that goes going into the future. But that's all we have here for this segment. Coming up next, we're going to be talking about the NFLPA fighting for non-football injury status rights for the players. Plus, we're going to give a little bit on the Jags situation and their franchise tag defensive end. Their situation is a little bit more complex. And players also looking and seeking a potential opt-out this season, obviously around the COVID-19 concerns. For all that here and more, stay tuned.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMCpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast right here on the GSMC Podcast Network. Last segment we discussed obviously the deals that were made on the franchise deadline day on Wednesday, as we discussed Dak Prescott and the Cowboys still not being able to get a deal reached, what this could mean for the Dallas Cowboys moving forward, and could this lead to a separation potentially in the future between Dak Prescott and the Dallas Cowboys. Also, King Henry, Derrick Henry gets paid by Tennessee, 4 years, $50 million, 25 guaranteed. Obviously, the man who single-handedly took the Tennessee Titans all the way to the AFC Championship game gets paid. Now he has a top 5 salary for running backs. And then another guy who got paid, Miles Garrett, $125 million, over $100 million guaranteed. Obviously making him one of the highest paid defensive ends in the game. Obviously the highest paid young defensive end in the game today. So obviously a lot of people getting paid. Also, Chris Jones, another star defensive tackle, got paid as well. So as you can tell, people were getting their money yesterday after getting franchise tagged, and also about 3 to 4 more players are happier today, while, like I said, Dak and the others are not. But now we're going to get into some news with the NFLPA, obviously regarding the season, updating in the league, and etc. We're going to talk about this story that was written about a report that the COVID-19 injury destination, a major sticking point in NFL negotiations. An article on Brice report by Tim Daniels. And I quote, "The National Football League and the NFL Players Association reportedly remain at odds about how to classify COVID-19 if a player contracts the virus during a practice or a game throughout the 2020 season." ESPN's Dan Grazio reported the issue has become a major sticking point in negotiations, with the NFL's latest proposal suggesting it would be declared a non-football injury, which would require teams not to pay any affected players. Meanwhile, the union has made several requests during the latest round of talks, led by an elimination of all 4 preseason games and daily COVID-19 testing. It also seeks financial and other compensation if players opt out of the season for coronavirus-related concerns. The discussions come amid a recent surge of COVID-19 cases around the world nationwide, which could threaten the NFL's effort to move forward with training camp July 28th, which is only about 11 days away. So clearly, this is something that's going to really heat up in the next 10 days if you're trying to pay attention and see what happens with this potential situation. There are no further formal scheduled talks between both sides, but they are expected to speak again soon at some point. In May, NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell released a statement saying the league will remain flexible with its plans for the upcoming campaign. "We will be prepared to make adjustments as necessary as we have during the offseason in safety and efficiently conducting key activities such as free agency, the virtual offseason program, and the 2020 draft." The league hasn't formally announced the cancellation of any preseason matchups beyond the Hall of Fame game, which was scheduled for August 6th. The opening week of the Expedition Contest is tentatively set to take place to August 13th, though that's increasingly unlikely with players seeking to eliminate the preseason. At minimum, the NFL is expected to shorten the preseason Expedition slate to 2 games, and week 1 of the regular season is still expected to kick off September 10th with the reigning Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs when they host the Houston Texans. So obviously you can tell, I think the NFL should be smart about this. Yes, it may be I mean, how could you say it's a non-contact injury? Because if you're contacting players on the field who could have COVID-19 and everything like that, why would you sit here and say that it's a non-contact injury? And so I think the NFL, I don't know why this is such a major sticking point to me. I understand that I don't know, are they trying to save money? Is this a money thing? They don't want to play players who get COVID? Like, I mean, listen, if another player on another team has COVID, and I say I'm going one-on-one, like wide receiver, cornerback was a corner on the other team, and I was a wide receiver, I'm going one-on-one, he putting his hands on me, then I get COVID. How is that a non-contact injury? How? I literally had to contact this man and then contracted it. It should definitely be listed as a contact injury, and they should be paid moving forward. They should not. I see what happens is if here's how you have to classify it. If let's say they were out and then they got COVID, then you could say that's a non-contact injury because they weren't not in the heat of battle, not in games or practices. This was outside. So if you want to do it, then you can classify it as COVID-1 case. A COVID-2 case could be okay if they get it on the field in the realm of the football, a football act, football play, a football anything. Then that's when they can get it on a regular injury basis and still get paid for it. So I don't think the NFL should be trying to fight that necessarily because I don't see what they're trying to fight in that situation. Clearly the players are in a very risky situation. You have the whole NBA players having to fight for insurance just in case something happens with COVID. So I don't see why the NFL wants to sit here and tell them, hey, if you get it, we're going to let's make it a non-contact injury so you don't get paid. I think that's unfair. Listen, if they didn't opt out of it, they should still be on it. And I think that's the biggest issue right here. So, I think that's just one of the things that the NFLPA obviously are trying to fight for in this situation, so we don't have that continuing lingering problem. Because it could be a lingering problem going into the season if these negotiations don't come to a positive outcome, I guess you could say, at the end of the day when trying to figure out what to do. But in other rumors, obviously, Unique Ngakoue, I might have said his name wrong, from Jacksonville, who was franchise tagged earlier this season, but at the same time, he has asked for a trade from the Jacksonville Jaguars. He is a star defensive end for them because he does not want to stay in Jacksonville, right? And so he's been looking to be traded. And teams have called about trading for him. But the Jags supposedly have been holding up the trade and rejecting offers, including one that even included a Pro Bowl player. And we're going to read the article, obviously, going into it. So, Ngakoue is reportedly doing all he can to facilitate a trade from the Jacksonville Jaguars. But the team doesn't appear to be in a rush to deal the Pro Bowl defensive end. Per Adam Schefter, Ngakoue has engaged in contract discussions with multiple teams and is flexible about potentially playing his season on the franchise tag. But a potential trade is being held up by the Jaguars' unwillingness to make a move. Tom Pizzero of NFL Network reported that the Jaguars were offered a Pro Bowl player who didn't fit their system in one trade proposal, but are still holding Ngakoue for the time being. Ngakoue's status has been a focal point of the offseason. On March 2nd, he tweeted the Jaguars were made aware he no longer had interest in signing a long-term extension. Jacksonville applied the franchise tag destination on him on March 13th to prevent him from becoming a free agent. Trade rumors have swirled around and it has been made public, obviously, by Ngakoue is desire to play for another organization. So, the Jaguars did not receive any trade offers prior to the 2020 draft, General Manager David Caldwell said. ESPN's Jordan Raanan reported in April that Jacksonville's asking price for Ngakoue started at a first-round pick and more. Ngakoue is yet to sign his one-year franchise tender worth $17.8 million in 2020. The deadline for the franchise tag players to sign long-term deals is Wednesday at 4 p.m. Obviously, that's passed. And Ngakoue, obviously, is 25. He made a Pro Bowl in 2017 after recording 12 sacks. And has basically been pretty great in his career in his first 4 years coming from Maryland. So, obviously, this is a weird situation. And this is a very weird, just a weird place for Jacksonville. Jacksonville organizationally has had some issues in the past with this type of stuff. Honestly, I understand this is a typical, maybe a player doesn't want to play there, but you're not willing to give the player up, so you're kind of it's just this stalemate. It feels like you're just in a stalemate. I think if I'm, Jacksonville, depending on the players and whatever gets offered to you, I think you should definitely look in to making a trade. I don't think you should be too restrictive about it. I don't think you should be against it. I think that it sounds like, from what I'm hearing, they're getting some pretty good offers for him. So it's not like they're getting shortchanged a lot. It just seems like they're just in a place where they just don't really feel like he wants to actually go. They actually want to let him go, trade him, and let him off to another team. So it just kind of puts you in this weird position, this weird spot, I think, in most teams and most franchises. I think you don't want an unhappy camper around your team because you don't know what his demeanor and how he feels coming in to the locker room when the season starts is going to be. So I think Jacksonville, you really have to look at this and say, do we really want to keep him around and potentially risk him maybe ruining some locker room chemistry? Because that's a question that's going to linger because you don't know. Like I said, you don't want to put yourself in that position to, get into trouble, create issues in the locker room, and then maybe have other players see this and say, well, they're not going to pay him and he's been productive, or they're not, or whatever happened, that's not making him happy. Then why should I stay here with this organization and put myself through the exact same things? I think this is probably the biggest thing that's going to be around for a while, and they'll have to see what they want to do moving forward. To me, they're going to have to decide if this is the best move for them moving forward as an organization. Because listen, Jacksonville in general is not expected to do too much during the current season, this season. They're not expected to be great. They're not expected to be good. If they are going through this full rebuild, trading him would probably be very ideal. Go ahead, maybe collect some more draft picks. And like you said, maybe a couple of players that could really help and maybe fit the system you want moving forward. And then go from there. Because these are the type of situations, like I said, they happen every offseason. Sometimes with the franchise tag, usually with franchise tag players, just because no player likes the franchise tag. And, obviously in just other particular contract situations, depending on the team and the player. The NFL just has to make sure they're making the best decisions for themselves and not putting themselves in position for any type of bad publicity in the future, especially in Jacksonville's case. And last story before we get out of here, Kenny Stills was arrested for protesting Black Lives Matter Breonna Taylor situation. And obviously this caused an outroar because, obviously a lot of NFL players came to his defense, supporting him, supporting the cause. Obviously with social injustice still being protested, even though it's not on the news like that, it's still being protested. Him getting arrested clearly is, a big issue because, it kind of shows some flaws in the system still. We're peacefully protesting, but you're still getting arrested. Like I said, he was bailed out. Players came to his support. Players have been speaking out for him. And it's just something that, listen, like I said, the world we're in now, this is something that will stick around and stay around for a long time. And if things need to be changed, and if things are going to be changed, it has to start at the top and through the systems and the courts and the legal systems and everything. I'm trying not to get too political here or too into that area on this podcast, but just gotta let it be known, gotta let it be said. So definitely I support Kenny Stills as well, and I think it was a wrongful arrest that he went through. And I'm glad he's out, and, hopefully you would think the NFL would not give him any type of discipline for this, because he didn't do anything wrong. You know what I'm saying? So, we just have to see what happens with that. But that's all the time we have here for this segment. Coming up next, players are seeking an opt-out trying to fight for an opt-out for the coming season, which I already kind of mentioned in the NFLPA fights. Also, NFLPA concerned with camps in hotspot cities and more NFL news. Stay tuned.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment we discussed the NFLPA fighting for different things for the league. Obviously, the main issue in the article I mentioned was they're fighting for the right to classify COVID-19 as a real injury instead of a non-contact injury. Because obviously, I made a little argument that basically COVID-19 can come through touching or, obviously through the air, but touching as well. And if you're playing a contact sport that makes you be involved with, have to touch and be physical with other people and you get COVID from that, I just don't see how you don't consider that a contact injury. I mean, that's literally what it was. You can't say that's non-contact. So obviously I think they should do that. Also, we talked about the Jacksonville Jaguars situation with their Pro Bowl defensive end. I discussed how they need to be careful. You don't want this lingering. You may not want to bring them into the locker room because of the issues that could bring up. But at the same time, I understand Jacksonville probably feels like, listen, we're not in a rush to move anybody. We don't feel like we need to move anybody. Maybe they feel like they can still handle the situation in-house. You never know how sometimes these franchises think, and that may be how they think. They may think, hey, we can still handle this in-house. We don't have to worry. And then also, we discussed the Kenny Stills situation. Obviously, Kenny Stills getting arrested for peacefully protesting and obviously getting bailed out and players coming to his support. So obviously, I just gave a little small dialogue, a little small monologue on that at the end of the segment. But now we're going to hop back into the news, obviously more NFLPA news, as players are seeking opt-out clauses and $250K spenders. So the NFL and the NFL Players Association are reportedly negotiating various opt-out clauses and guaranteed money for the 2020 season that figures to have plenty of uncertainty among the COVID-19 pandemic. Jeremy Fowler of ESPN reported the news, noting players proposed a number of terms or a number of items to the league. One of them is a guaranteed $250,000 spender for any player who arrives at camp if things are shut down because of the pandemic. That guarantee would go to $500,000 if the season begins and is shut down before ending. What more, players propose an opt-out clause for at-risk players to still receive their salary if they do not play, and opt-out clause for those with at-risk families to still earn an accrued season and benefits, even if they don't play, and an opt-out clause for those who are leaving their teams, who leave their teams after reporting. Fowler noted, both sides are still working through a number of issues, including the fact players want testing every day and 0 preseason games compared to the league's request for less frequent testing and 2 preseason games. In terms of opt-out clauses, what exactly classifies it as at risk is still being discussed. The league sent out a memo on June 7th that listed the following as potential factors that would make someone high risk: African American, Hispanic, Pacific Islander, a BMI greater than 28, greater or equal to 28, sleep apnea, hypertension, altered immunity, diabetes, and cardiac arrest. This has been an unusual offseason for the NFL as it works potentially towards having a season. The most dramatic change was canceling all in-person activities around the NFL draft, which was originally scheduled to take place in Las Vegas. The draft was held remotely and largely went without a hitch, even though team personnel were able to conduct many in-person meetings for prospects and free agents because of travel restrictions. To this point, the regular season schedule remains intact without any changes. That stands in stark contrast to any other major sports leagues around the country, including the NBA, MLB, NHL, and MLS, which have all had to suspend their current seasons in March when the severity of the pandemic first started to become clear. There are still multiple things to work out through, for the league and the players. But as Fowler pointed out, both sides want camp and want to play. So the goal is to get there and survive the probable initial wave of potential tests, then manage expectations from there. So obviously, again, and then listen, they should definitely have this. And basically, you know, I mean, this like I said, the NBA players fought for this. I'm sure MLB fought for this. MLS has fought for this. They should have opt-outs. They should be able to say, hey, if something happens, I either need to still be paid or still have my year counted or something. I don't want, with this pandemic that could affect me or change what I do or change something during the season to affect me where now I lose money or I lose a year off my contract. I believe these are reasonable. I don't see why the NFL could not give this to them. Because listen, I've said multiple times, players could get into the season and then they see what happens with the pandemic and they see what happens with everything and says, you know what? I'm out. I'm not comfortable. I feel like my safety's at risk. And I can't do this. And so it'd be nice to still have that opt-out and be like, hey, I don't feel comfortable. I need to opt out. And the league still at least acknowledges it and says, okay, well, we're going to give you this for you opting out. So it's not like you're just opting out and just leaving the team. So it's something that is definitely going to be looked at. I think these requests, especially with the 0 preseason games and everyday testing, clearly this is coming from the player side. So clearly they want to make sure, hey, we want to make sure we are good, because they're trying to look at it like, listen, we need to be on top of this situation. We do not need to be going out here potentially playing against people who currently have the virus, because that puts us at risk, then could put our families at risk, and then could put other people at risk, and then it could just, because if something spreads within the NFL, the biggest sport in all of America, and they have to shut down, I mean, that would tell you, if everything that has happened does not tell you the severity of this situation. If the NFL has to shut down because of COVID-19, then you know what we're dealing with is a very, very dangerous situation. A very, very dangerous situation. And it should not be taken lightly. So you definitely, I think as the NFL, again, you need to just, in this situation, with the league already having the reputation that they may not necessarily care for the players like that, or they're not willing to go out of their way to support their players, obviously because of the Colin Kaepernick stuff and et cetera, and things and rulings that have been made over the years in the NFL for the past decade. If the NFL wants to shut all that up, if the NFL, the league, wants to change that perception, if they want to get rid of that, they need to give the players what they want to ensure their safety. Because trust me, nothing is better than knowing I can come to my job and I know if something happens, they got me. They'll support me. Well, that's all we want from our jobs and our employers. We want jobs and employers who's like, listen, if something comes up, is this going to hurt me, or are you going to be able to help me? And the NFL needs to show they're willing to help the players because they understand this is a very tic-tac situation. If they say no to things during this situation, it's like you're basically saying we don't promote safety as our number one priority if you say no. Because you can't say no and then say it's your number one priority moving forward. Where is the evidence that is your number one priority moving forward? How do I personally know it's your number one priority moving forward? Where do we get that fact that it's your number one priority moving forward? I'm looking for something to tell me that. You not showing me anything that's telling me that. So they need to make sure they have good grace and good faith in these negotiations. So if they mess it up, man, listen, all I'm saying is they need to make sure they get this situation handled. They need to make sure they get this situation handled. If they don't let this continue to linger, because that's the last thing the NFL needs right now, is to get reports that there gets promoting testing and giving the players the most safe environment they could potentially give them, and giving them opt-outs just in case a situation gets worse. You gotta protect the players. Simple as that. That is one thing that people have said about the NBA. Because listen, it's not going to be perfect, but if you show you're willing to go out of your way to try, that's good enough. But if you take and you say no to certain things that could protect them, then it just makes it seem like, do you care that much? Do you really honestly care that much? Because I don't know. I have no clue. You ain't giving me anything that shows me you care, so I don't know if you care. So we'll have to see what happens with that. And then another thing, the NFLPA expresses concerns with training camps in hotspot cities. And after I read this article, I'm going to actually tell you about a released graph or a chart of all the hotspot cities in all of the football towns after this article. As the COVID-19 pandemic continues to run rampant in various parts of the United States, the NFL Players Association has expressed concern about certain teams holding training camps in their respective cities later this month. We have one question that basically encapsulates it all. Does it make sense for the NFL to open up training camps in hotspot cities right now? A person familiar with the NFLPA views told Mark Maskey of the Washington Post. A high-ranking team official offered similar concerns. We all want to play. We all want to make this work, but there are some big issues in this country that can't be ignored. In Philadelphia, for example, the Eagles will not be permitted to have fans in attendance for the entirety of the 2020 season due to a city order. The Miami Dolphins are also preparing for a potential interruption in their plans as coronavirus cases spike in Florida, which is now becoming basically the epicenter of COVID-19. The Dolphins have communicated with their players that everything is up in the air, according to a source familiar with the situation, that the team could see things getting pushed back. Adam H. Beasley of the Miami Herald reported. Miami's training camp is set to start July 28th, but another source told Beasley that it could literally pivot on a dime. I think we get a hard answer this week. It's also unclear how comfortable players are reporting to training camps amid the pandemic. The NFLPA has already expressed a desire to eliminate any preseason games this year. Tampa Bay Buccaneers lineman Donovan Smith, whose child is due in 3 weeks, said that he's concerned with the starting back of the league. And I quote, this is what Donovan Smith of Tampa Bay Buccaneers said. The unfortunate events of COVID-19 pandemic have put a lot of things on hold. Football is not one. To continue discussing the many unknowns do not give me comfort. Risking my health as well as my family's health does not seem like a risk worth taking. How can a sport that requires physical contact on every snap and transfer of all types of bodily fluid every single play practice safe social distancing? How can I make sure that I don't bring COVID-19 back to my household? Yes, we can get tested every day, but if it takes 24 hours to get my results, how can I know each day that I'm not spreading this virus or contracting it? These are the questions the NFL and the NFLPA will continue to wrestle with as the league tries to keep its schedule on track. And obviously, I'm going to get to that map I told you guys about, that chart that I saw. So basically, this is the chart on COVID-19, a national overview of that COVID-19. So the top 5 cities with the highest, obviously, COVID-19 risks and just numbers right now, and the teams that live in these states are, number 1, the Miami Dolphins, obviously, because I've told you, Florida is the epicenter of COVID-19 right now. Arizona has a very high rate. Their numbers have increased a lot. Arizona Jacksonville, clearly also, again, because they're in Florida, they're third. Tampa Bay, as you see, all three Florida teams are in the top 5. So that should tell you how dangerous Florida is right now. If you feel like going to Florida, yeah. And number 5, the Tennessee Titans. So clearly, numbers are high. The lowest right now, if you want to know the lowest, I'll give you the last 3 lowest. The Buffalo Bills, the Jets and the Giants, and the Patriots. So clearly, you can tell a lot of Southern teams are having a problem, a lot of Northern teams ain't. So it seems like the North is more safe than the South right now when it comes to COVID-19. But that's basically the seriousness of the situation potentially going on right here. And so honestly, it's understandable why this situation is where it is right now and how the league needs to really handle and get a handle on the situation moving forward going into the season. But that's all we have here for this segment. Coming up next, the NFL will be testing mouth shields. My opinions on that. And I'll give into a discussion point. What's the most difficult part of contract negotiations for a team in my opinion? I'll discuss that all here and more on the podcast.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment we discussed players seeking an opt-out, seeking opt-outs in different ways and different spenders, everything like that, just try to basically protect themselves during the COVID-19 pandemic. They're trying to get all these things negotiated with the NFL so they can be protected. And I went on a little rant, I guess you could say, basically saying the NFL, listen, you already have a very questionable image, not just within the players, but within the general society when it comes to player safety, when it comes to, you know, are you there for the players when they need you? And I basically said, listen, if you sit here and you say no, and you sit here and try to not do as much as you potentially could to help the players, it's going to hurt your image and it's going to make the players not trust you even more. And so you definitely probably, if you want that image to change, you need to kind of jump on it and make sure that you're protecting the players at all costs with any possible thing that you could give them so they could be, because because at the end of the day, I've said this, if you do anything you can to do that, then the players will be satisfied. But if it feels like you're keeping things that they feel like is not over the top away from them, you're going to create issues. And we also talked about the NFLPA being concerned with camps being held in hot spots. I obviously named top 5 cities in the hot spots because obviously, you know, you have a camp there and there's high COVID cases. You're putting those teams and players at risk more than maybe teams that don't have much of a hot spot and maybe could create an unfair competitive advantage potentially if you have a lot of players getting COVID-19. So obviously, that's going to be something that will be interesting moving forward. But now we're going to get to some more news, and we're going to talk about the story. So the NFL obviously has, you know, they work with the Oakley mouth shields people, and they basically sent something basically saying, can we get mouth shields on helmets to help prevent COVID-19? And it was unveiled Monday what they would look like. So they're looking at this mouth shield thing. This hopefully can protect people. According to Tim McManus of ESPN, the NFL is expected to distribute the shields to all 32 teams this week for testing, and league medical experts advocating for their use, although there is no current mandate for players to use them. That's certainly what we're going to encourage, NFL's chief medical officer, Dr. Alan Steele, said of the shields. And we hope that we're going to land on a product design that's something that everybody would want to wear because we see the value and the want that additional protection without deterrent to performance. So players reportedly don't want a mandate to wear shields, according to Mike Florio of Pro Football Talk. Houston star J.J. Redick also speak out. Not J.J. Redick. Why did I just say J.J.? J.J. Watts also spoke out against wearing any kind of shield. And I quote, this is what J.J. Redick said. Why do I keep saying J.J. Redick? J.J. Watt. my second year in the league, I thought it'd be cool. I put a visor on my helmet. I was like, it looks so cool. I want to put a visor on. I had it on for about 3 periods of practice, and I said, take this sucker off. I'm going to die out here. So now you're going to put something around my mouth. You can keep that. If that comes into play, I don't think you're going to see me on the field. Several players throughout the league have already have been given the mask, and will provide feedback after testing it. According to Jeff Kendall, chair of NFL's engineering committee, internal testing of the Oakley mask has seen a significant blockage to transmission of droplets. The coronavirus has already caused over 130,000 deaths in the United States, while cases continue to rise, per the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The NFL is still planning to go forward with its usual regular season schedule beginning in September, with players set to report to training camp later this month. So obviously, that's going to be something we need to keep an eye on moving into the future. Also, other news, just some small news. Jason Peters has been brought back to the Eagles for a 1-year deal. A long-term Eagle tackle. Has some injury issues this past year, but obviously, Eagles trying to keep their offensive line together so they can protect Carson Wentz in a year they think they could potentially have a big year overall. So we'll have to see what happens with that. But now we're going to get into my discussion point / topic to end out this segment. And basically, my opinion. What makes NFL contract negotiations so ticky-tacky, so hard? What is always the main issues that you see when you see or hear about negotiations? And to me, I think the issue is this. Now think about an agent. When you hire an agent as a player, their job is to get you the best contract possible that you feel like fits your value. So that's one side. And then the team will look at you and say, okay, this is how we see you in our plans and how we want to construct our team. And so this is how much we kind of are willing to give you. It's always weird. It feels like teams, I don't want to say lowball, but kind of always try to think, can we give them a minimum? Like, obviously we got to pay him more than what we were paying him, but like, you hear it all the time with contract negotiations. It feels like the player's at a high number and the team's at a low number. And it's like they're trying, and then it's like you got to come to the middle where the player's satisfied, where it's like, it's not the actual number I might have wanted, but it's close enough. But the team also feels like, okay, it's not the number we wanted, but it's not over the top like it was originally. It really honestly depends. Obviously, if you look at Patrick Mahomes' situation, you would look at that deal and they're talking about, some people say, oh, he left money on the table, but it's like, listen, he still got paid more than any quarterback in NFL history and any athlete in history. So he's really not doing anything that's just like, wow, why would he take that contract? The agent got him the deal that he was supposed to get his agent, his client, Patrick. But then you look at Dak's situation and you just think, people are saying Dak wants closer to 40. The Cowboys want to stay around 35. And you're thinking, well, why can't y'all maybe get to 37, 38? Who is being stubborn? Is Dak being stubborn and not willing to go down? Or is the Cowboys being stubborn and not willing to go up? And, I just think it could just be hard if the team views you differently than how you view yourself, because you're always going to view yourself as a top player, You're always going to view yourself as, especially if you've had a great season, you're going to say, listen, I've put up numbers, I've produced, I've done a lot of things. So why is it so difficult for me to get maybe the money that I would like to have or want to have? And then teams have to sit here and justify, well, we have other players we may have to sign, so we want to make sure your number doesn't go too high. We have players that, also need deals, so we have to try to see whose deals we can get done soonest, and then we'll have to see how much money we got. It's just a big, dilemma. And that's why sometimes contract negotiations can get ugly. Because, like I said, certain players feel like they deserve certain things, and they don't understand sometimes why certain, play people on their team or their ownership or GMs or whoever sometimes seem resistful to giving them that money that they feel like, hey, I don't see why I can't get paid this amount of money, based off my production. And every position is different as well. You could obviously tell quarterbacks, it's different. Running backs, it's different. Wide receivers, it's different. It's not the same for every position when it comes to negotiations. Usually, for the most part, let's say you feel like you're a top 5 player at your position. A lot of the time, you want top 5 money. But the team may see who has a top 5 salary and say, well, I don't know if we're willing to go that far. Because sometimes, usually, most players, if they're even in debate as the best player in their position, they're going to want top position money. They're going to want number 1 money. Because they feel like, well, I'm in debate to be the best player in the game in my position. Why can't I get paid like I'm the best player in my position? Because we know how this goes. Eventually somebody else going to come along and get more money than me. So it's not like you're getting a contract that nobody will ever surpass. Like I said, Patrick Mahomes is probably the only contract that you'll see no one actually surpass when you see other quarterbacks get deals, as far as we know. You'll see people get a lot more money than whoever the second place, which is Russell Wilson, I believe, right now. But you won't see anybody surpass Patrick. Maybe someone may be able to surpass him on a year by year basis, but you wouldn't see that necessarily in terms of someone surpassing him in terms of overall money over the years basis. You know what I'm saying? I feel like you wouldn't see somebody like that surpassing him. And so it's just a big pressing point here. You see it all the time. Jamal Adams is another situation. He wants to be paid as the top safety. The Jets, I guess, even because if you think about the situation, we haven't really heard a lot from the Jets. And so for the most part, it feels like what you're hearing and what you're seeing is that we don't know really how much the Jets are willing to give him. But apparently, whatever it is, it's not satisfying him. And so that's the issue. And you can get into numbers and you get to how he is as safety. Well, he's not a Tyreek Matthew. He's not a Ed Reed. He's not that kind of safety, even though he's a really good safety. So I don't think maybe he should get top safety money. But listen, like I said, as an agent, you're going to try to get the best deal. If Jamal Adams can make an argument that he's the best safety in the game, the agent's going to try to get best safety in the game money. That's just as simple as it gets. That's as simple as it goes. Because that's what his job is. He's supposed to get his client the best possible contract. And then that's, like I said, that's sometimes where teams don't view it. It depends on the philosophy. How much money does this team want to tie into certain positions? Some GMs don't want to tie in a certain amount of money to certain positions. You see it clearly with the Jets again with Adam Gase and Le'Veon Bell. He said, I don't think running backs should get paid what Le'Veon get paid. I don't want to pay my running backs that money. That's why they've always said he was never really fond of Le'Veon Bell, because of the fact that he got paid that money. It was never that he thought Le'Veon Bell wasn't good. It was just, I don't want to tie that kind of money into him. You see what I'm saying? And that could be the situation with Joe Douglas and Jamal Adams. He just doesn't want to tie a certain amount of money into him. Because that's sometimes what it is. The only position where you kind of have to tie money into it is quarterback, for sure. But there's teams that's like, I don't want to tie a certain amount of money into my running backs. I don't want to tie a certain amount of money into my wide receivers. And so we're going to make what we have work with what we have. Because they want to make it work for everybody. Because obviously you want to keep your best players. It's not like you don't want to keep them. It's not like you don't want them to stick around. It's just a matter of, I'm not really trying to overpay and give out too much money when I know there's other things that we have to worry about and we have to try to get done during this season and the off season and coming seasons moving forward. And so that's why you'll always have it year by year. We can sit here and say a player is greedy, players ask for too much money, or the team's not willing to, they don't appreciate the player enough. They're not willing to, provide security for the player, et cetera, but it's honestly, it's a business, and this is business. Business is not always going to look good on paper. You have the football side, and you have the business side, and so you have to think about doing what's best for you. In a way, you could literally say all these players are entrepreneurs, and they're getting signed to a team they're signing the rights over to a team, but at the same time, they're still entrepreneurs. So they're like, listen, if I'm gonna sign with you and give you my rights, I want to be compensated the right way for my rights and my production. And so it's the world of contract negotiations in the NFL will always be a very complex one. But that's all we have right here on the GSMC Football Podcast. Thank you for listening and letting me be a part of your day. Don't forget to listen to our other amazing podcasts on the GSMC Podcast Network. Don't forget to follow us on social media as well. Also, don't forget to leave a review or like or whatever platform you're listening to us on. We definitely appreciate it. Thank you for tuning in. Like I said, everybody wear your masks and have a good day.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.